Filip Chytil looks like he's shot out of a cannon. We break down his big night, and we discuss who else stood out for the Rangers as they claim a 3-2 win in a nasty game against the Bruins.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1145 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Ranger hockey finally upon us. It might be the preseason, but it still feels good to see our boys go out there, get a big 3-2 win against the rival Bruins, and a back and forth game, a spirited game, a very physical game. You know, for anybody that wasn't really sure what to expect in the first preseason matchup for both these teams, and you can count me among you, I think we were all pleasantly surprised. I mean, first of all, you get to come from behind, win by the Rangers on the road against a rival, but that's really secondary to, just what a exciting, competitive, hard-hitting, physical, and at times downright nasty game this was between the Rangers and Bruins. I was not the only person to point this out. Sam and Joe mentioned this as well, but this felt like a midseason clash between these two teams, and this despite the fact that, most of the regulars for both the Bruins and the Rangers were not even dressed for this game. But I think that also kind of explains the intensity that we saw during this game. There's a lot of guys out there with something to prove, and you got to figure out a way to get the coaching staff to notice you, to turn some heads. You got some roster long shots on each side, and you got to figure out a way to make things happen and make a positive impression. And I think a lot of players on both sides did that. And the result, like I said, a chippy, competitive, spirited game and a very exciting 3-2 win for the Rangers. But I cannot go a second longer on here without talking about Filip Chytil. For my money, the best player on the ice for either team. I think this is a very welcome sight for Ranger fans everywhere. Obviously, things just did not go Filip Chytil's way through absolutely no fault of his own, as we've talked about on here. Obviously, the concussions played a major issue or a major role with Filip Chytil, just never really getting his season off the ground last year. 10 games at the start of the season, and then in the playoffs was in and out of the lineup. I mean, it was great just to see him back, but even there, he wasn't really Filip Chytil. We saw Filip Chytil playing like Filip Chytil in this game last night, and I realized before everybody points this out, it was against a lot of guys that are not going to be in the NHL at the start of this upcoming season. You've got some career AHLers on the Bruins, just like you had on the Rangers. And obviously at times, Chytil was going around these guys like they were standing still, but you still got to feel good for Filip Chytil. Goal and an assist. And we'll get to the hockey stuff in just a second. But man, just from a human perspective on this whole thing, we know the trials and tribulations that Filip Chytil has endured over the last calendar year. And honestly, even before that, because the concussions really came to the forefront for Filip Chytil this past season. But that's been an issue for him really ever since he's come into the league, and still even now facing something of an uncertain future, but somebody that has been cleared and all systems are go for this upcoming season for Filip Chytil. So there's that. But my hope too, and I'm sure what Filip Chytil is also hoping, is that at a certain point, the concussion issues become a thing of the past, or at least as much of a thing of the past as is possible, given the circumstances. And it gets to the point where when we're talking about Filip Chytil, we're just talking about hockey and the impact that he can and hopefully will eventually make for this Rangers team this upcoming season. First of all, you got to talk about his line. He was out there. The de facto first line for the Rangers was Filip Chytil, centering Will Cooley on his left wing, Kaapo Kakko on his right wing. And as I mentioned, a lot of the big-name Ranger players, the star players, they did not participate in this game. They had a scrimmage earlier in that day. More on that in a little bit as well. But Peter Laviolette said going into the game, between the Rangers and the Bruins here, this is a line that he was going to be watching very closely. And it stands to reason that he would do that. First of all, you've got Will Cooley. Great rookie season, very consistent, very solid, but obviously somebody that, looking to make more of an impact this upcoming season. And I think for sure wants to maintain his grip on a top 9 role. Will Cooley can play the fourth line. We saw him do that at times last year, but, the further you are up the lineup, the more you're going to get to play. And Will Cooley, I think for sure, wants to remain in the top 9. Filip Chytil, I mean, we're going to continue talking about Chytil here. We've already talked about him a little bit, but obviously he's got to show that he's over his concussion issues and that he's going to be a big-time part of this team this season. And we keep our fingers crossed from a human side and a hockey side that is indeed the case with Filip Chytil. And Kaapo Kakko, I mean, there's no really shortage at all as far as scenarios that could play out this season for Kaapo Kakko. Kakko could end up on the top line with Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider. I think they're going to start this season with Riley Smith. I think that's how they should start this upcoming season. But Kaapo Kakko, I mean, he's going to be in the mix. And if anything goes wrong with Smith or they need a shakeup, if Kakko excels, he could find himself in that spot. I also think, in a worst case scenario for Kaapo Kakko, it's possible he ends up getting traded at some point this season. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's super likely, but if he struggles, if he falters, if somebody else steps up, an Offman or a Berard, whoever it might be, Kakko could be the odd man out in a worst case scenario for Kaapo Kakko. So Kakko, I mean, all eyes are going to be on him. I thought overall he had a solid game in this one. Wish he would have stood out maybe a little bit more than he did. But, overall, a really strong night for this line. But Filip Chytil, man, I mean, now that we've covered his line mates, again, I said this in the intro, looked like he was fired out of a cannon pretty much the entire game. There were multiple times in this game where he had the puck in the Rangers zone, skated it out, and then pretty much went coast to coast. Weaved his way through the neutral zone, went around a couple of defenders, gained the blue line, went toward the net with a full head of steam, and got a couple of scoring opportunities out of that. So he was leading the rush up the ice for the Rangers. One of those led to a goal, and in fact, the game-winning goal that was scored by Alex Belzile. So Chytil's got the puck in the Rangers zone, and again, just shoots through the neutral zone, weaves around a defender right around the red line there at center ice, goes to the right, gets the blue line, takes a little bit of a hit, as he's approaching the blue line to deliver the pass to his right to Alex Belzile. Belzile goes up the right side, takes a shot, and a little bit of a soft goal here, but we'll take it. It gets through the 5-hole. Belzile scores. That was relatively early in the third period. That gave the Rangers a 3-2 lead. Filip Chytil with the primary. Connor Mackey also got an assist on this play as well. And there were multiple instances of this, like I said, where Filip Chytil showed that great burst, that excellent speed that he has, took advantage of it by just zipping through the neutral zone and leading the charge into the Boston zone. Filip Chytil also scored a goal in this game, which is fantastic to see, preseason or not. I do think when Filip Chytil scores a goal in the regular season, when he gets his first home goal of this upcoming campaign, Ranger fans have to treat it like he just scored a playoff overtime winner. It's got to be that big of a deal. It's got to be that loud inside Madison Square Garden. Just let Filip Chytil know, we got your back. We didn't forget about you. And, we're hoping for big things for you this year. And we're here for you through all the trials and tribulations with the concussions and whatnot. But bottom line, the Rangers scored on a power play here. Goal was eventually scored by Filip Chytil. Chytil was also the man that drew the penalty. You had Kastelik taking out Chytil's legs out from underneath him. Looked like a little bit knee on knee. I'm not going to call it dirty or anything like that. Just one of those plays where Chytil gets tripped up. Fitzgerald jumped in there for the Rangers, and he actually challenged Kastelik, and the fight never really got underway. But the bottom line is the Rangers go to the power play for this incident here. Will Cooley also said something to Kastelik. He had some, trash talk for him on Kastelik's way to the penalty box. I think you're going to see Will Cooley this year, assuming that is the line. We get Cooley and Chytil and Kakko. I think you're going to see Cooley, really watch Phil Chytil's back this upcoming season, because with those three players, the most physical one of the bunch, Cooley, Chytil, and Kakko, it's definitely Will Cooley. And I just get the feeling that you're going to see him watch out for Filip Chytil this upcoming season, and maybe even drop the gloves if the occasion calls for it. But the Rangers go to the power play. The top power play unit is Chytil, Cooley, Kakko, Mancini, and Brodzinski. And you had Mancini. He had a great game again in this as well. He really stood out in that two-game set between the Ranger rookies and the Flyer rookies. He takes a shot that goes wide. Johnny Brodzinski, great hustle here. He gets to the loose puck before the Bruins can. Comes out around the other side of the net, passes to Filip Chytil. Chytil's kind of near the boards, brings it in front toward the center of the ice, takes a shot, and just beats the goalie over the glove. He scores and gives the Rangers a 2-1 lead. And just a great sight to see. Again, it's preseason, so, these goals don't really count, et cetera, et cetera. But bottom line, this is the first time that Filip Chytil has scored a goal in an actual NHL hockey game in more than a calendar year. That had to feel great for him. And honestly, even just watching his celebration, he kind of just put his arms out and I just felt like a little bit of a relief, just getting that feeling of scoring an NHL goal again, and good for him. And, I didn't see this lineup until right before the game started because I was out doing things. I don't know exactly when they posted the lineup on social media. Usually I'm on top of that, but I got home, basically put the game on, and just kind of found out almost in real time, who's going to be playing in this game. But if you could give me one thing positive to happen in this game, it would have been Filip Chytil having a big night and Filip Chytil, specifically scoring a goal. But more so than anything, just looking healthy and energetic and ready to play NHL hockey this season. We got all that and then some from Filip Chytil. It wasn't just the points. There was a play in the second period where Filip Chytil really took advantage of his speed to negate an icing. Always got to love that play anytime somebody really busted up the ice to, get the linesman to wave off an icing. Filip Chytil was able to do that. You also had Filip Chytil take a couple hits in this game, and that's also encouraging to see. It's not like he got leveled or anything like that. He went down pretty hard on the aforementioned penalty against the Bruins, but a couple other times he got knocked around a little bit, but he seemed to shrug it off, just get back up, jump right back into the play. All positive things for Filip Chytil. And yeah, the goal that he, basically created, got the puck over to Belzile. That was also the result of, Filip Chytil using his explosiveness and his burst up the ice. So good stuff all around. I also found out from the announcers during this game that Filip Chytil's brother is actually his personal trainer. And they mentioned that, he's just in great shape and his conditioning is just off the charts. And that was on display. We'll talk about this a little bit later in today's episode. But toward the end of the game, the Rangers are obviously trying to hang on to a 1-goal lead. Filip Chytil was stuck on the ice for a long time while the Bruins had their goalie pulled and the Rangers had to take an icing. And Filip Chytil, wasn't showing any fatigue or anything like that. You would have thought that he just jumped on the ice, for his first shift in a long time. That was not the case, though. Filip Chytil, his conditioning seems to be very good. And as I've said all along, Filip Chytil is the X factor for the New York Rangers this upcoming season because largely due to his concussion history, we just don't know what exactly to expect. But if Filip Chytil can hit the ground running, go back to the player that he was 2 years ago, and more importantly than anything for himself, from, just a human perspective and also from a hockey perspective, just stay healthy, then the sky's the limit for Filip Chytil this season. Could have a big-time season for this Ranger team. And just one game, just one preseason game. But man, Filip Chytil, give that man an A+ for his performance last night. Going to keep everything rolling in just a second. We've obviously talked about the first line for the Rangers and most specifically Filip Chytil. Going to go ahead and break down the rest of this lineup that the Rangers put on the ice for the preseason opener against the Bruins. Also going to talk about some of the quirky things that we saw in this game that are kind of a product of the fact that this is the preseason, and we will get to all that fun stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more when you are on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Go to FanDuel.com. Also want to mention that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Indeed. We are driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate is not to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with quality candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed data survey. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the everydayers. Ranger hockey is underway, so you're definitely going to want to stick with Locked On New York Rangers going forward. Back, obviously, to 5 episodes per week. Just cannot wait to go through the season and hopefully deep into the postseason as well with all you Ranger fans this upcoming campaign. Also going to be talking in our next episode about the Rangers cutting 15, and I think it's now 16 players from training camp. Nothing too crazy here. Maybe one or two surprises as far as players that got cut this early in the camp. But, we'll talk about that in the next episode. For right now, let's keep the focus on this game against the Bruins here. Also going to touch on the scrimmage just a little bit. But for the game against the Bruins here, line combinations, we already know about Cooley, Chytil, and Kakko. That was the de facto number one line for the Rangers in this game. Second line, left to right, you had Brant Othmann, Johnny Brodzinski, and Jimmy Vesey. Probably a good sign, and Sam and Joe mentioned this as well, that Brant Othmann is out there with some, veteran, mostly established NHL players in Jimmy Vesey. Obviously, he bounced around the league after his first tenure with the Rangers, but he's back, become an important player on this team. Great penalty killer. Johnny Brodzinski, career NHL, AHL swingman, but finally became a bona fide starting NHL player, a guy that was in the lineup on most nights, for the Rangers down the stretch this upcoming season. And once he made it back to the NHL last year, he remained with this team. So that was obviously nice to see. And if you're Othmann, it to me tells me that the Rangers are giving him a fair look and a fair chance, and they're putting him out there with some bona fide NHL players, possibly even some guys that he could end up with at some point, if he is to make the team coming out of training camp here. We shall see. But Othmann, he had a pretty eventful night. A couple of scoring chances in the third period. There was one in deep where Jimmy Vesey passed out of the corner, and Othmann tried to redirect the puck into the net. Had a very good chance to do so, which is a better save by the Bruins netminder. But there was also, some fisticuffs involving Brant Othmann. He had a massive open ice hit on Witherspoon fairly early in this game in the first period. Witherspoon went down, missed some time, came back into the game a little bit later. Clean hit. The refs even took a look at it. They determined that he led with his shoulder, which he did. It was shoulder to chest. Textbook clean hit in open ice, but a big hit there by Brant Othmann. He had a hit behind the net a little bit later in the game as well. And then, as I mentioned, Witherspoon got back into the game a little bit later. And at the end of the second period, the two of them ended up dropping their gloves. Othmann lost this fight, but in a way, he kind of won the war, because when the fight was over, Witherspoon was kind of like shoving Othmann in the back of the head, and almost it looked like he was like trying to shove his face into the ice, which is not cool. Once people are down the ice, the fight's over. Let's get up and let's move on, right? But then he also took off Othmann's helmet and threw it. So because of this, the Bruins were hit with a 2-minute penalty in addition to the 5-minute majors that obviously both Witherspoon and Othmann were assessed at the end of the second period. So that gave the Rangers a power play. That's why I felt like kind of led to the Rangers, sort of winning the war here, even though Witherspoon, you could say, won the battle. But overall, solid game for Othmann. I'd like to see him with the puck a little bit more often and, shoot the puck a little bit more often. There wasn't a ton of that from Brant Othmann. But we'll see. He's facing something of an uphill battle to make this team. But if he shows well for himself down the stretch, there's 5 preseason games left. He won't be out there for all of them, but I think you'll see him get probably at least 4 games. And if Brant Othmann can put his best foot forward, certainly somebody who has a chance to crack this roster going into opening night. You had a third line, left to right of Sikora, Grew, and Belzile. So Adam Sikora, former second-round pick, getting to play with a couple of, again, those aforementioned NHL, AHL swingmen. Overall, decent night for this line. Sikora has done a little bit. He didn't really stand out a ton to me in the rookie series, nor did he stand out a bunch in this game either, but we'll keep an eye on him going forward. Somebody that could be a little bit of a dark horse to make his NHL debut at some point this season. I don't think he'll be a regular with the Rangers, but, high motor player, despite not being that big, and certainly we'll keep an eye on his progress if he opens the season with the Wolfpack, which seems somewhat likely. You also had a fourth line, left to right of Anton Bleed, Jake Lecision, and Yaroslav. I wrote down the pronunciation. If you bear with me for a second here, Smalash. Apparently that's the pronunciation. That's what Sam Rosen was going with. And Sam found out that was the pronunciation, apparently from Filip Chytil. So we'll go with that until somebody tells us differently. I will say, of all the guys on this Ranger team, in this Ranger organization, that sort of fit the bill of like career NHL, AHL swingmen, and guys that seem a lot more likely to start this season with the Wolfpack than with the Rangers, the guys that are kind of the veteran NHL, AHL swingman, I think Anton Bleed might be my favorite. He's just a really hardworking player. He's in that category with guys like Belzile. I would say Riley Nash for sure. Lecision, who played in this game as well. Ben Harper, Connor Mackey, guys that have played in the NHL and have played a decent amount of games, so not really a ton of games, maybe less than 100 games in the case of most of these players. I think Bleed is probably my favorite. Got into one game with the Rangers last season, has played 84 career NHL games, also with the Bruins and the Avalanche, former 6th-round pick, all the way back in 2013, still kicking around all these years later. It's tough though, because where exactly, how is Anton Bleed supposed to crack this Ranger roster? It just doesn't seem like there's really an opening for him, but he is a hardworking, hard-nosed player, gritty player, a guy that's certainly willing to mix it up as well. So I like Bleed. He's somebody I'll keep an eye on for sure, but I don't think the Rangers really foresee anything big for Anton Bleed in the future. Just a personal favorite of mine as far as the journeymen are concerned. As far as the deep pairings, you had Connor Mackey and Casey Fitzgerald. Both these guys have a little bit of feistiness to them. I think especially Connor Mackey. He was the guy, if you guys remember, a lot of Ranger fans on social media were joking that he saved the Rangers season last year. He was only up for one game. It was against the Senators, but that was also either late January or very early February. And that's when the Rangers were really going through a tough time. January was by far their worst month of the season last year. And he came out and, was playing with some feistiness in that game, got into a fight in that game. And that's when things kind of turned around for the Rangers. And as I mentioned, a bunch of Ranger fans on social media were kind of joking that Connor Mackey saved the Ranger season. I don't know if I would go that far. Obviously, that's kind of tongue in cheek. But yeah, I mean, this is somebody that definitely plays with an edge to his game, and that's always nice to see. Brandon Scanlon and Braden Schneider were out there as a pairing. They were listed as the second pairing. Schneider really the only defenseman that was active for this game that we expect to make this team and also, be out there on opening night, I think for sure. You also had as listed as the third pairing, Matthew Robertson and Trey Mancini. This is very likely to be the top Wolfpack pairing to start the season. I thought Victor Mancini. I don't know if I said Trey. Trey's the baseball player. Victor Mancini is the defenseman for the New York Ranger. And I thought overall, he looked very good in that 2-game set against the Flyers. Another strong performance here, hitting everything that moves, and just a solid all-around game for Victor Mancini. Really liked what I saw, and somebody that could be climbing the ranks. As we talked about before on here, Robertson and Mancini, when you look at the Wolfpack depth chart, it's really, with defensemen, it's basically just Robertson and Mancini that you can really consider to be prospects for this team. The rest of them are some of those aforementioned career journeymen, NHL, AHL swingmen. So as far as like a young defenseman to get a crack with the Rangers this upcoming season, it'll probably be Robertson or Mancini. Robertson had kind of a rough turnover during this game. It led to a really good chance for the Bruins, and Louis Domingue was able to bail him out. But the theme of this lineup to me seemed to be guys with something to prove for the New York Rangers. There's guys that, in the case of Kakko and Chytil, trying to carve out big roles for themselves this upcoming season. There's also guys that are roster long shots trying to make this team. And I think that was very obvious in the style of game that this ended up being. There's guys on the Bruins that I'm sure match this description, guys with something to prove, guys that, need to force their way into the lineup. While this was going on, or more accurately, slightly before this was happening, the Rangers also had a scrimmage that involved all of the players that did not participate in this game between the Rangers and Bruins. We'll talk about that in just a second, and also some of the other quirks of this game that are kind of a byproduct of this being the NHL preseason. I'll explain what I mean by that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Want to play PrizePicks alongside Drewski, Joe Budden, and MMA champ Sugar Sean O'Malley? You can now find community plays under the promos tab on the app and view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks does not hit. Players and stats that you're selecting are all up to you. And like we were saying, you've got 2 to 6 that you can hit on every single time that you play PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, figure we can wrap up today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers by talking a little bit about the scrimmage and then also a couple of closing notes from this game between the Rangers and the Bruins. Once again, the Blue Shirts preseason opener. So, like I said, we had the scrimmage that happened. Every player on the Rangers, basically, that did not play in this game was participating in the scrimmage. On one team, Team White, you had Kreider, Mika, Smith, Lindgren, Fox, Edstrom, and Ruedel, among others, obviously. Team Blue, you had Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere, Miller, Trouba, Jones, and Rempe, amongst some others as well. The 2 goalies were, of course, Igor Shesterkin and Jonathan Quick. Matt Rempe was tripped during this game, so he was awarded a penalty shot, but Igor Shesterkin denied him. Jonathan Quick later denied Edstrom on a penalty shot as well. It sounds like any penalty that was called during the scrimmage, they were rewarding the player that drew the penalty with a penalty shot. I'm not 100% on that, but just piecing together all the tweets and all the videos that I saw, it looked like that was indeed the case. You had Mika, Kreider, and Smith. They all scored a goal for Team White, or at least that's the belief. You know, the reporters, it's hard to tell based on where they are in the rank. They don't really know for sure. They don't officially keep track of stats in this game or anything like that. There's no PA announcer announcing who had the goal and who had the assist or anything like that. But it sounds like, once again, piecing this all together on social media, Mika, Kreider, and Smith, who were all playing on a line together, every single one of them scored 1 goal. And it sounds like Chad Ruedel also had the 4th goal for that team, Team White. Team White was up 4-1 at the break. They went on to get a 4-3 win. But it sounds like Zach Jones was the one that scored for Team Blue. To cut the lead down to 4-2, he scored off of a pass from Artemi Panarin, and then Lafreniere also scored to cut the lead down to 4-3, but that was also the final score of this scrimmage. And you got to figure anybody that did not play in the Rangers preseason opener, the players that instead participated in this scrimmage, they are very likely to be out there in the game on Tuesday night when the Rangers host the Islanders at 7 p.m. So very much looking forward to that game as well. Getting back, though, to the preseason opener here, once again, between the Rangers and the Bruins, a couple of things that caught my attention that I thought were kind of unique. And in some cases, the reason why these things happen is very simple. It's a simple fact that it's the preseason. In other cases, though, maybe this is a little bit of a sign of what's to come, and I'll explain what I mean by that. For starters, you had Kaapo Kakko on power plays. He was on the top power play unit, which he will not be to start the season, but I would imagine he'll be on the second unit. But they actually had him set up as kind of the net front presence while the Rangers were on the power play. He was in front of the net to varying results, a couple of chances for Kakko and this top unit. And of course, they did score on one of their power play opportunities. But that was just interesting to see. Kakko, obviously, big bodied player, something that could be worth a look. If Kakko is, able to, work on deflections, and if he's able to really set up shop in front of the net on the power play, then that could be an option for the Rangers' second power play. I thought that was unique. He also, Kaapo Kakko, that is, was out there on the penalty kill, and he was also out there on the ice near the end of the game when the Rangers were protecting a 1-goal lead. Now, will we see Kakko's role expand to that degree in the regular season? It's at least possible. I do feel like there's an avenue where the Rangers could look to possibly, and I'm not sure how much I want to see them do this, but it's at least possible that at one time or another, whether it's this season, next season, whatever it might be, at a certain point, I do wonder if the Rangers might look to scale back the amount of penalty kill time given to Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider. On one hand, I don't want this to happen because they're both very good at it. You look at the Ranger penalty kill over the last handful of seasons. It's been one of the strengths of the team, ranked number 3 last year, and they're both very, very good at it. They can even create some offense while shorthanded from time to time. But you also don't want these guys gassed. These guys are very, very important to your power play, and certainly 5v5 as well. I know there's a lot of Ranger fans that were less than thrilled with what the Rangers got from Kreider and Mika at 5v5 last season. So, they're not 37, 39 years old, but Kreider is now 33. Mika is now 31. Do you scale back some of their penalty killing a little bit? And if you do that, do you start giving more penalty kill time to somebody like Kaapo Kakko. We've been talking about how good Kaapo Kakko is defensively in recent seasons, but you very rarely, if ever, see him out there on the penalty kill. Does that become an option for the Rangers this upcoming season? It's at least possible. He made one really good play while the Rangers are shorthanded in this game. The Bruins had the puck at the blue line. He was able to basically challenge the puck carrier, knock the puck out of the zone and into the neutral zone. So just one play, but Kakko, I think, certainly did not look out of place on the penalty kill. And you can never have too many penalty killers, right? I mean, they lost a couple of guys. Barclay Goodrow no longer here. Alex Wenberg no longer here. They still have a lot of very good penalty killing forwards, but you can never have enough of them. There's no real limit. I think going into the season, we always think like, maybe 6 forwards could be in line to get some time on the PK. But why not have as many as 8, at least 8 different options that you could have and throw out there while you're shorthanded, depending on what the situation, the game might be, depending on who's in or out of the lineup. Always a good thing to have a versatile team. And in this case, several players that can kill penalties as well. While we're talking about Kakko, might as well also mention this. Another quirk of the preseason, Kaapo Kakko, Jimmy Vesey, Braden Schneider. They were your 3 alternate captains for this game. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's a situation where all the usual suspects were not there. Everybody that wears a letter for the Rangers was not playing in this game, but it is somewhat interesting. Kaapo Kakko, I think they're trying to get him going a little bit. That's probably a good way to empower him. Slap the A on his jersey there, at least for one game. You've also got Jimmy Vesey, hardworking veteran. I think that's a great choice as well. And Braden Schneider, as I mentioned, probably the only defenseman that we saw in this game that's going to be out there for opening night for the Rangers. So good choices there all around. I thought also something that was interesting in this game, Will Cooley. We saw him killing penalties. Will Cooley, again, just played a very steady, consistent brand of hockey last year. I'm very curious to see how much the Rangers or how little the Rangers expand his role this upcoming season. I do think he's going to be somebody that will be entrenched in the top 9. I think that Vesey's going to do a little bit more offensively this year than we saw him do last year. Cooley is going to be doing that this upcoming season. He had a really strong rookie season. I think there's a very good chance that he'll be able to build on this. Hardworking, hard-hitting player, and somebody that, I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do this upcoming season. And I mentioned before, there's at least that possibility at one time or another that maybe the Rangers will look to scale back Mika and Kreider on the PK. And if they do that, you're going to need somebody like Kaapo Kakko, somebody like Will Cooley to step up. But overall, a solid game for Will Cooley. Interesting to see him out there killing penalties as well. They didn't really have him doing that as a rookie, but maybe now he's more acclimated, more comfortable at the NHL level, and you can put a little bit more on his plate going forward. Always one of my favorite quirks of the preseason as well. We had the goalie splitting the game. Louis Domingue started. Dylan Garand relieved him just past the midway point. That was always the plan going in. They were always going to split this game. But both of them played very well, and 2 of the biggest reasons why the Rangers won this game. Domingue was impressive because he gave up a goal very early in this game, less than 2 minutes into the action, closed the door after that, ended up stopping 14 of 15 shots. He also really held it down for the Rangers during a 5-on-3. Boston had a 5-on-3 for more than a minute. A chance to go up 2-0 very early in this game. Domingue made a couple of tough saves there and kept the Rangers in it, obviously. You also had Dylan Garand playing very well in relief. He stopped 12 of 13 shots. He also had to face a 5-on-3. Did not give up a goal while that was happening. Or that might have just been a 5-on-4 for the Bruins. It's all kind of blending together at this point. But they were very, very good in this game. I mentioned earlier that Domingue bailed out Robertson with a really tough save after Robertson had given the puck away. We also saw Garand late in the game with the Bruins down 3-2, a strong drive to the net by the Bruins, and Garand made a couple of back-to-back point-blank saves, had to move to his right to keep the puck out of the net and preserve the lead there for the Rangers. And I'm very, very curious going into this upcoming season, if somebody not named Igor Shesterkin or Jonathan Quick plays a game in net for the Rangers, if it would be Domingue this year like it was last year in that one game for the Rangers, or if they would go to Dylan Garand. I feel like this year they might go to Garand just to see what he's got, basically do with him what they did with Will Cooley and Brian Hoffman the last couple of seasons. 2 years ago, it was Will Cooley getting to play in 4 games. Then he got sent back down. Last year was Brian Hoffman playing 3 games, getting sent back down. And for a goalie, basically the equivalent of that, I think, would be playing just in 1 game. And they're not going to do it just to do it. They're not going to sit down both Igor and Quick just so that Dylan Garand can have a game. But if there's a situation where, and knock on wood, we don't want any injuries to our goalies, that's for sure. But if there's an opening there for either Garand or Domingue to make a start, I think you might see Dylan Garand. Maybe there's a situation at the end of the year Maybe the Rangers are locked into their playoff spot. They've got one game left. They want to call somebody up. It could be Dylan Garand making his first NHL start. At that point, we shall see. But I figure we can pretty much call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.